Hi guys, hope you all doing well. Welcome back to our series of Azure Active Directory, and in this video we are going to talk about how to troubleshoot Azure AD authentication issues. Now if we talk about the components, or if we talk about the theoretical part which we have covered, we have discussed about each and every option that is available on portal.azure.com in terms of application configuration, as well as we have covered most of the protocols which can be used, or different authentication flows which your application can adhere to depending upon the protocol which your application is using. Whereas the agenda of this video will be knowing how to troubleshoot issues which are related to different parameters or endpoints or permissions or users access control. Now, user access control that I have mentioned in this particular deck, it is something which is directly related to the option which is called user assignment required, which is there in the enterprise application section, and that option helps you to implement IDP authorization, wherein you can actually control that whether a user is supposed to access a particular application or not. This is the basic fundamental behind user access control. Now, before we go ahead and start troubleshooting the issues, or I'll start showcasing you guys some of the common issues which I have already included in this particular presentation. I have a certain request with all the members, and that is, if possible, please share your feedback and ask as many as questions possible. You can ask me anything which is covered in this particular video or any of our other video, or as a general, if you have any query that's moreover related to any components that we are covering in our videos, and I will respond to each and every comment. Also, if you think that there is something which I have missed and which you think it should be there in any of our videos, please let me know. Please notify me with the comment section, and I will try to include that in our next video, or whichever video wherein I can keep that information as a reference so that I can let you know, or I can answer your question in much more efficient way. Okay, so this is something which I need from all the members, because then only things will start making sense if you'll ask questions, and if we'll have better examples to discuss how exactly things are working under the hood. Okay, so now let's proceed by knowing what you should do if you get a specific set of error message. Let's start by client ID being invalid or misconfigured. So this error that you see right now on the screen, this error will only come if the client ID that has been configured on the application side is not matching with the client ID that exists in Azure Active Directory. And if you read this error message, it's pretty much simple to understand that application with this particular identifier was not found in the directory called ConceptsWork.com. Now, there could be two reasons why you will get this error message. The first one is the client ID that you have mentioned is invalid. That means you have to go ahead and update the client ID value on your application side and match that with the client ID value that exists in Azure Active Directory, or your application is redirecting the request to a wrong endpoint. So likewise, my directory name is conceptswork.com, but let's say while coding the application there is some mistake that I have done, or there is some typo, but the request is now landing to contoso.com's directory, or the endpoint that is hosted for contoso.com directory. In this case, the client ID which I will be mentioning in my authentication request will not be recognized by that particular directory, and the same applies to the client ID being invalid or wrong. So let's say if this particular client ID does not even exist in my Azure Active Directory, how would Azure Active Directory relate that what kind of claims to be included in a particular token? So now what I'll do, I'll switch to my machine where I have configured a wrong client ID so that I can show you this message, and I can show you how to fix this issue as well. So this is my client machine where I have an Azure AD sample application up and running, and as of now the client ID value that exists here is invalid. Now let's see what will be the user experience the moment I will click on sign in with Microsoft. The expected behavior is that I should get prompted for my credential, but once the credentials are validated, the Azure AD will not be able to decide that for which application an authentication token has to be issued, and that's the reason why you get this particular error message, which is the same which we have seen in our deck. So now to fix this issue, I'll initiate a logout. I'll close this. I'll come back to my application and I will update the correct value of the client ID, and I will again reinitiate my application. So I'm again landed back to the home page of my application, and this time the client ID value is valid. So I'll come back to my browser and I will click on sign in with Microsoft, and I should get prompted for username and password. And that's exactly what's happening as of now. I will type in my password, and this time I should land back to my application as a signed in user. It should show my UPN at the right hand side top, and that's exactly what's happening as of now. So if you are getting any error that's moreover related to the client ID value, two things you have to verify. The first one, the client ID value that exists in your application is the same which your admin has provided, and the authentication request is reaching a valid endpoint. That means the same endpoint that belongs to the targeted Azure Active Directory. Now, it's not only about client ID, client secret equally holds the same importance. That means if you will not mention a valid client secret value, this is something that you're going to get on the browser. And if by any chance in any case you are getting this error, what you have to make sure that whether invalid client secret is provided, any sentence like this exists or not. If that is the case, what you have to do is you have to make sure that the client secret value is appropriate. In case of redirect URI, there could be many errors because redirect URI is equally important as compared to client ID and client secret for web-based applications, because this is the link where the response from Azure AD is sent back. So let's say if I'm entering a value in my application that does not exist in the application object. So likewise, as of now, I'm saying that the redirect URI should be this particular value that's ending up with 44326. And if I go back to my portal on portal.azure.com, and if that particular value will not exist over here, then also you will face issues or you will get errors. This error which I'm showing you right now is something wherein I have mentioned some alphabets in between the port number that exists in this particular console. So if I mention some of the alphabets over here, then I will get the same error message that you see over here. Now, there is something which is very common these days because of the coexistence of two type of endpoints. The first one is v1.0 endpoint and the other one is v2.0 endpoints. Now, we know this that v 1.0 endpoints were majorly used with Azure AD Graph, and v 2.0 is something which is majorly getting used with Microsoft Graph. But what happens that depending upon the endpoints that you are using, there are different values that you should include. Okay, so if I'll give you an example of one of the sample script which we have or which I have in my case, and let me quickly show you that particular application or this particular script. And this is something which I will be sharing in the community section as well. If you guys want, you can review this as well. So as of now, what is happening that this application is going to use v2.0 endpoints. This is my valid client ID, my valid client secret. Now, what we know that v2.0 endpoints expect a scope parameter in the request. But let's see what happens if I'm going to choose a parameter which was there with v1.0 endpoints. So that means that a resource was something which was supposed to be used with v1.0 endpoint instead of v2.0 endpoints. So now if I'll come back to my PowerShell and if I'll try to run this particular script, let's see what exactly happens. The first thing it will ask me is my tenant name. I'm sorry for this typo. We'll reinitiate this script. ConceptsWork.com, and as you can see, I'm getting an error which says that the resource request parameter is not supported, and this can happen vice versa. So what do I mean by this? That you may be using v1.0 endpoint in your configuration, but the parameters that you are using, it can be different. So if I'll replace this value, let's say now with scope, okay, an appropriate value that's moreover related to v2.0 endpoints. And if I'll clear my screen, I will reinitiate my script and I will type in my tenant name. As you can see, this is what I'm getting. So this script will also decrypt the token for you. And if you guys have seen the video wherein I was talking about access token, there is something which I have covered called components of JOT token. Okay, wherein the second component of JOT token is called payload that contains the claims value. So what I have done with the help of this particular script, I have also decoded that token here itself. And if you will remove this value from this particular script, let's say I just save this and I come back to my PowerShell and I again reinitiate my script, I should get that token listed here in the PowerShell console itself. And as you can see, what actually has happened with the help of client credential flow, my application got an access token, which is being decrypted for you as well. So this is exactly what's happening with this particular script. I will be sharing this in the public community post. If you guys want, you can take it from there. Now, the agenda behind showing you this part was to show you guys that it's not only the applications. You can do a lot of research from your scripting skills as well. Now, I'm not going to create any playlist as of now for core scripting. This is just some demos which are very easy and which I will be sharing in the community post. You can use them in whichever way you want. Okay, now let's talk about our next issue, which is moreover related to permissions. If you guys have seen this prompt, this is also very common, wherein what exactly happens that your application is trying to request a consent which can only be approved by admins. So if a normal user tries to access, or if for a normal user a particular request or a particular parameter is mentioned in the scope, they will get this error message. Let me switch to my application and show you guys what exactly I'm referring to. So if I go to the web config section, you can see these are all the values which are appropriate as of now apart from this. So I'll just fix this as well. Now what you have to do is you have to go to the startup section and then click on authentication. Let me drag it down. On authentication failed section, or any of these sections that exist here, and then you have to search for the section from where you are defining scopes. So as of now, you can see I'm sending a scope which is mail.read, which can be approved by user. Okay, so just to show you guys, I have to initiate a force logout. Let me close this. And now I'm going to update this value, which can only be approved by admins. So let's say I want to give permission which says users.read.all. Okay, and now why I'm saying like this, because if you will go to portal.azure.com and if you will go to the API permission section, and if you will try to delegate a particular permission, you see this value which says user.read.all is something which requires an admin consent. But as of now, this is something which I have given for application, whereas when your application is requesting an access token on behalf of a user, it will be a delegated control. Okay, so I'll come back to my application and I will reinitiate this application request, and I'll show you this prompt which my user will get, because this user, which is enter@conceptswork.com, is not the global admin of my directory. So I'll click on IS Express and wait for the browser to get loaded. So now my application is loaded again, and I'll click on sign in with Microsoft. and then I should get prompted for username and password. That's exactly what's happening. I'll click on my account and then I will click on my password. I'll type in my password and then I will click on sign in. And as you can see that it is giving me an error now which says that scope users.read.all that does not exist. That means this is something which does not even exist for the required component which we have requested. Now this is something which I was not expecting, but I will show you guys how to relate to things and fix this issue. Now see that this is something which is given to us by the Azure AD itself. That's why we are getting this particular error code here. This is the name of the application, and the scope which says users.read.all does not exist. So now how to fix this? Let's go back to portal.azure.com, and here we can see that it says user.read.all. And if I come back to my application, what exactly we have mentioned, it says users.read.all. So if I remove this value and if I initiate a logout request again, and I will close this browser and I will reinitiate my application. Now this particular scope should reach Azure AD, and this is something which I can show you guys as well. Now the expected behavior is the authentication will go through and I will land to this particular consent prompt wherein it will not be approved because this particular user is not an admin. Okay. So my application is loaded again and I'll click on sign in with Microsoft. And let me show you guys the exact value which is as of now being sent from this particular console. Okay, it's as of now encrypted, but when we get the response, it should show us the required value. Okay, so now I'm going to select my account and then I'm going to type in my password. And once the authentication process is completed, you see I'm getting the same prompt which we were talking about in the deck. So it says that this particular user or this particular application cannot be consented because it requires admin approval. Now there are two ways to fix this issue: either sign in with a global admin and then consent this on behalf of your entire organization, or if you want you can consent from here as well, but it would be highly recommended to consent with your login attempt instead of consenting it from the portal. Now let's talk about an issue wherein all the configuration from an application perspective is in place but still the users cannot access this application. Now this issue actually comes when you have registered an application but for some reason user assignment required is set to yes. Now where exactly you will find this option, I'll show you on portal.azure.com. So as of now we are in the application object section which is accessed from app registration, but if you will go to enterprise application section and search for the same application, which will be in our case OpenID Connect MSAL user, and then if you will go to the section of properties, there will be an option which says user assignment required set to yes. If this is set to yes, and then what actually happens that you have to manually assign users to this particular application and then only they will be able to access. So as of now what I have done is for this application I have said user assignment required set to yes, and I have not assigned any user to this particular application. Now the expected behavior is that when I will try to sign into my application, I should get this particular error because as of now, the application assignment is not in place. But before we go ahead and reproduce the issue, what we need to do is we have to remove this particular value which we added initially so that I can show you what exactly happens if an admin consent is requested from user. So I'll replace this again with mail.read, and then again I'm going to click on IS Express to reinitiate my application. So now I'm again landed back to my application and I will click on sign in with Microsoft. I will type in my username and password as it is expected, and then I should get the same error which I have shown you guys in the deck, which will say that this particular user cannot access this application because there is not a proper role assignment available. So as you can see that the signed in user is not assigned a role for this particular application, and if you guys remember, this is the same set of information which was there on our deck. So these are some of the very common issues which you may encounter while configuring applications, different types of applications, and I have tried to collate a different set of errors, some of them related to scripts, some of them related with to sample application. I will be sharing this script in the community post as well. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. So let's talk about a quick summary of what all we have discussed. In this particular video, we have actually seen how to troubleshoot issues related with parameters, endpoints, permissions, and user access control, which is the user assignment required option. Now, if you guys think that our channel is helping you to learn more, please feel free to share these videos with your technical community. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.